Hey everyone, my name is James and welcome back to Chippy Gaming. So as many of you know, Terraria 1.4 is right around the corner with a release date of May 16th, meaning in 27 days everyone will have access to the final update of Terraria. But when you're a big Terraria fan, 27 days kind of feels like an eternity. So I, like many other people, have been trying to find new ways to distract myself and make the wait a little bit easier. So one thing I've wanted to do for a very long time is to actually go back to the original version of Terraria and try and complete it. It's the version of the game that I've not completed in almost 9 years. So going on a mad nostalgia trip just seems like the right thing to do right now. Almost like when a new Avengers movie is coming out, you gotta go back and watch the old ones. So for a little bit of context, the last time I played and completed this version of the game, I was 14 years old. So trying to remember exactly how it all worked was actually a bit more of a challenge than I first thought. I thought going into it, it would be so easy. It'd just be like Terraria 1.3, but with a lot less stuff. Nah, not quite. It's a whole different experience. So one of the things I really wanted out of playing this is to figure out what exactly it was when I was 14 years old that really drew me into this game. So stick around to the end because I think I figured it out. But with that out the way, let's have a little look at how I got on playing 1.0.3 in 2020. So my adventure began like any other in Terraria. I needed to make a character, and it was really strange going back to a system that didn't use the little sliders to create what color you wanted in the game. And it's funny because I remember as a kid, I'd never really played a game before that required you to actually manually make a color using numbers. So I would max them all out, and that's how I got white hair. And that's eventually why I ended up using the Clothier as my avatar, because I really liked having white hair in Terraria, so it just seemed to fit. So once I'd got a brand new world, I started off by doing what most Terraria players do, and that was chopping down some trees. And this worked just like it does in the current version of Terraria. But then when it came to making a house, things felt really different. For example, you couldn't use your pickaxe on wood, you actually had to swap over to the normal axe. And you couldn't build out of your inventory. That was a feature that was added in 1.1. So for a couple of minutes, I kept trying to place out of my inventory and just throwing the item on the ground. That was probably the most jarring thing to get used to, at least at the very start. So after creating my new house, I decided that I wanted to explore the world a little bit, and the very first thing that I found was actually the corruption. Now, when I was a new player, I used to actually be pretty worried about the corruption, but obviously having played so much Terraria now, I thought, you know what, I'm probably ready for this, I know how to platform and move. But what was weird was the spikes on the ground actually did so much damage and caused knockback that it was a bit of a train wreck. It was actually kind of hard on the corruption, which is odd. So then I moved my attention to finding my first cave, and as I went underground, it felt very much like Terraria. I ended up finding this big pile of sand, and I used to hate this when I used to play Terraria originally. How every cave system would always have this big pile of sand blocking the way, and then you'd spend ages getting rid of it. I'm really glad that you don't really find that as much in World Generation now. And then I stumbled across my first gems, and it's so funny to mine gems because they don't have a purpose in the game at this point. There's nothing you can really do with them. I'm pretty sure that at one point you could use certain gems to make certain pieces of the jungle armor, which was in this version of the game, but grabbing sapphires, yeah, there was nothing to do with them but sell them. I was then super excited because I managed to find myself my first classic blue mushroom biome. This is something that I'm really looking forward to in 1.4 because as we showed in the trailer, they look a lot different now. I remember as a kid, I really used to love these. It didn't last long though, because I ended up dying to a skeleton immediately afterwards. Yeah, not much room to get out of this situation, so I just bit the dust. I then decided to walk across my world and find a new tunnel system, and this one was a little bit better. At least I found some other stuff. It was so strange to not be able to break pots with torches. I don't know at what point they added that back in, but now thinking about it, it's actually kind of one of my favorite features. It was so annoying to just have to place a torch, break a pot, pick up the torch, move the torch, but you know how it goes. After about an hour of playing, I found my first chest. Super excited. It's an angel statue. It doesn't do anything. I actually completely forgot about angel statues. These things were so annoying, and I still don't know to this day why on earth we had angel statues in chests. I then found an actual blue mushroom biome. These were the ones that I really loved, the ones that had giant trees. I thought these were so cool. And then I ended up getting my second death because I couldn't get out of this watery hole with this mother slime. Now, if we were playing Terraria today, that mother slime couldn't have got there because slimes now float. But that was a pretty bad death. But thankfully, since I'd done some mining, I now had enough silver to make a silver bow. And this thing was so useful. There aren't actually many weapons that you can use in the original version of Terraria. And this one was great. And then I noticed, oh yeah, there isn't a trash button in Terraria like there is now. So I just threw it on the ground. I then found my second chest. And this is where things really started to make a difference for me. So as I mined my way through the hole, I was super buzzed. It's an angel statue. Yeah, of course it's an angel statue. These things were so annoying. So while I was mining, I actually found a couple of bombs from some pots. So I decided to go back up to the surface and go do a trick that most Terraria fans would do today, where you basically go and blow up a shadow orb to go get yourself a musket, because it's pretty simple to go down a corruption chasm if you just place platforms, but you can't blow it up. That's right. In this version of Terraria, you needed dynamite, and to get dynamite, you needed a demolitionist, and for some reason, it didn't matter how many sticky bombs I had in my inventory, which is what the requirement was, I never got one. I then traveled to the far right of the world, and this was the weirdest thing for me. I found the beach and the ocean, and despite not having any sharks or jellyfish, it was really strange to me that 9 years on, it's pretty much the exact same. I then found my third chest, and inside was an enchanted boomerang. I remember as a kid, I didn't really care too much for these. Enchanted boomerangs are pretty good because they give a lot of knockback, so if you want to put a lot of space between you and the enemy, it was great. But what I mainly used it for was just light. These things are so bright, and light is quite hard to come by in classic Terraria. And then, after about an hour and a half, I found my first life crystal, and I was pretty buzzed about that. Bit weird to have to mine it up with a hammer, but I'm pretty sure that was the case in Terraria 1.1 as well, so I remembered that quite well. But then I found my fourth chest, and my fourth chest, well, it contained another angel statue. That's right. The thing is, I actually only found 4 cavern chests in my 5 hours of gameplay, and 3 of them were angel statues. Why did you do this? I then decided to go back to the surface and check out what the left side of the world looks like, and I found a classic dungeon. I just love how garishly green this thing is. I don't think I ever had a green one when I used to play Terraria. I used to either find a pink one or a blue one. These green ones are really fun looking. And then of course, I had to go and look for the water bolt. I knew that the Dungeon Guardian was in the game at this point, but what I found surprising is that you could go so far down without triggering it. If we're comparing this to Terraria today, I probably went down about double the distance that you could do today, but I found my water bolt. It's a shame because I never really got the chance to use it. I didn't have any mana when I spawned, and to get mana, it took 10 fallen stars, which took a really long time to get. And then if you only had 1 mana star, you only got to fire 1 bolt, so it was a bit of a shame. I then found my next beach, and inside was an accessory that helped out so much. The flippers. The flippers came in handy more than anything I found during my whole adventure. I absolutely love them. Definitely got more appreciation for the flippers now. So what I decided to do was head up into the sky. I remembered that when I used to play Terraria, one thing that you would do is build a sky bridge to collect fallen stars easier, and that is how you'd find sky islands. Well, I built my tower, but I didn't find one yet, so I decided to head underground. But that's when things started to change. I got my first message saying an evil presence is watching me, and you all know that means the Eye of Cthulhu, but unfortunately, I didn't have a magic mirror. And even if I had a magic mirror, I didn't have any mana to use it, so I had to manually go right back to the surface, which took forever, and then I faced off against the Eye of Cthulhu. Now let me tell you, this is not an ideal location to fight the Eye of Cthulhu. If you're ever going to do this fight, make sure it's not in a hole. But this fight was really fun actually. I'm surprised that I actually survived for as long as I did. The cool thing about healing in the original version of Terraria is that there was a cooldown on potions, but it was only about 10-15 seconds, so you could pretty much stay invincible if you were careful and took them at the right time. But unfortunately, what ended up happening is that it turned daytime, and the Eye of Cthulhu was gone, and I was so close to beating it. What I really enjoyed though is just how similar it was to the Eye of Cthulhu we have today in normal mode, so it felt like second nature fighting this boss. So then I went back to working on my sky bridge because I knew it was something that I wanted to finish, and I found my first floating island. Now, this was the only one I found in my adventure, sadly. I had a full sky bridge by the end of the run, and I found myself a gold one. What I really liked about these is that if you got the gold one, it was usually surrounded by a bunch of gold ore, so it was great to get all that ore. And I found a shiny red balloon, which is an item that I still love in Terraria today, 9 years later. It's something I always look for. And it was funny because if you were playing Terraria now, you would just get a grav potion, but this version of Terraria, there were no potions, so you just had to manually find everything. So since I now had a shiny red balloon, which really helped out with movement, I decided it was now time to do the Eater of Worlds. And this is how I would have done it if I was playing Terraria as a 14-year-old. I always did the Eater of Worlds first. The reason I did this is because it's not actually that expensive to craft. You need a few vile mushrooms and you need some rotten flesh. And then you can make yourself the worm food. So using some shurikens that I bought from the merchant, which actually came in very handy, I made a pretty simple arena and I got to work defeating the Eater of Worlds. It was odd to do the Eater of Worlds back on the surface again. This is something that you wouldn't really do today. Most players would just head underground with a couple of bombs. They would probably spawn it in that little chasm layer that you get at the bottom. Well, those chasms didn't exist in this version of Terraria. All you had was the tunnels, so your only real option was to fight it on the surface. And it was a lot less aggressive than I remembered. Like, it just seemed like it just wanted to linger around the bottom of my arena. But after a while, and it really did take a while, I ended up defeating every single piece. And what I really liked is that you could get a new piece of shadow armor just for defeating the boss. You didn't actually have to craft it. For every time you killed the boss, you would get a random piece of shadow armor. And I thought that was really neat. I kind of liked that, and I wish that maybe it would come back one day. But who knows? Final update, probably never going to happen. So I could now craft the Nightmare Pick using some of my Demonite, and I didn't really want any more pieces of armor. So I got to work, I destroyed my first Shadow Orb, and just like it is today, it was the same 9 years ago, you would get a musket for the very first orb that you destroyed. The musket was alright, I mean, it was okay, kind of like the musket now. Although I do feel like I'm using the musket more and more. I then destroyed my second Shadow Orb, I didn't want to do a third one, and I ended up getting the Orb of Light. Now, in modern Terraria, that's a light pet, but light pets didn't exist back then. So you would actually need 40 mana to spawn it in, and it would only last a couple of minutes. I didn't have that kind of mana, and I didn't have that kind of patience, so I actually never ended up using it pretty much throughout my entire run. I then knew I could use my Shadow Pick to go and grab some obsidian and some hellstone, and it kind of blew my mind just how hard it was to make obsidian. Like, I poured a massive pool of water onto some lava, and I ended up with 7 pieces. So then after about half an hour, I actually managed to stumble across hell, and this place is so different than what it is now. There's none of those obsidian houses, they're all made out of hellstone brick, and fire imps, man, they feel so much more ruthless, because the balls that they throw at you, they have such good knockback that usually you'll end up in lava. And of course, by this point, I don't have a grapple hook because that was tied to the goblin invasion that never showed up over the 5 hours. And I don't have rocket boots because it's the exact same thing. You have to get them during the goblin invasion. So I ended up dying here. I got trapped in some kind of knockback cycle with the lava. This was the last time I came here, but you know what? It was fun to go back, but I didn't really need hellstone. So it was at this point that I decided that I probably don't need any more upgrades. I'm probably just ready for Skeletron, which was the final boss in this version of the game. So I headed to my dungeon, I built a simple arena, and what was cool is that when you actually clicked on the old man, there wasn't an option to fight Skeletron. It just sort of happened, and I really liked that surprise. But unfortunately, even though I was able to survive the fight, I wasn't able to kill it in time. So once it hit daytime, it insta-killed me, just like it would today, and that was really fun to see. I really liked that. So by this point, I actually had enough lenses to make a suspicious looking eye. You couldn't find these naturally in this version of the game, so you actually had to make one, and it took 10 lenses. Now, lenses were a lot harder to get in this version of Terraria, I found. the eyes didn't spawn as frequently as I wanted, and they didn't really seem to drop them very often. So this was after about 4 hours. So then I cracked on with the Eye of Cthulhu, technically round 2. And of course, I stomped it. Very easy fight when you played Terraria for 9 years. But I took it down with a demon bow, and I really liked it. It just felt like normal Terraria, and it ended up giving me some more demonite, and I didn't really need that, but that was cool at least. I could have maybe made some armor. So since I just used that night to take down the Eye of Cthulhu, I knew that I just needed to wait one more night to take down Skeletron. So I made some slight adjustments to my arena to help out, because of course I didn't have any of those movement accessories that I really needed. And then it was a pretty long fight, but I took down Skeletron. I remember as a kid, I always found it so underwhelming when you took down Skeletron, because it didn't really give you any kind of reward. The Eye of Cthulhu and the Eater of Worlds would give you armor and ore that you could use to make new stuff, but the reward for Skeletron always was the dungeon. But with that, that was the end of my Terraria 1.0.3 adventure. Now you may be wondering, hey, why didn't you do King Slime? Well, I actually thought King Slime was in this version of the game as well, but it turns out it wasn't. It was added in an update a couple of days later that also added in bunnies. I don't know how I didn't notice this, but throughout my entire adventure, I never found a bunny, and I seem to remember that they were in the game from the start, but they weren't. So I think if we do another one of these, I'm going to start it in 1.0.4 and go and find King Slime. Why not? So going back to what I mentioned at the start, did I find what I was looking for? Did I manage to remember why I fell in love with Terraria as a 14-year-old? Well, yeah, but also kind of no. At first, at least for the first hour or two, I found the game so frustrating, but I feel like it's because I'm so used to something that's so much more smooth and polished. But then it was when I found that floating island, that sense of discovering something in the world is what really pulls me in every single time. That's what I really love about Terraria. It's exploring and having a new adventure each time. And I really began to appreciate this older version because of the fact it had less stuff. It meant that when you did find something, it was always way more special and way more rememberable. Whether it was those flippers or those 3 angel statues, I had a pretty good time. So I would definitely recommend checking out the old version of Terraria. However, you can't actually access this, unfortunately, and it would be illegal to link you to a place where I could share it. So I'm really hoping that for the 10th anniversary of Terraria, maybe a year after Journey's End, when the developers have got a little bit more free time, because I'm sure they're super busy right now, maybe they might find the time to make some of the older versions accessible for people to download and go check out, maybe slightly modified so that you don't have to move your save folders around and stuff like that. That'd be pretty great. Right, well that wraps up today's video. I really hope you've enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it, please do let me know if you'd like to see the next update, which would be 1.0.4, and I'd also throw in 1.1 as well for the fun of it. So I hope you had a good time with the video. Thank you so much for watching. Remember, if you haven't already subscribed to Chippy Gaming, now's a really great time. I'm going to make sure that you've got lots of content in the build up to 1.4, and then once the update drops, I'll make sure that you've got plenty of guides and tutorials to have the best experience with that update on launch day. Right, have a great one, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.